Okay, great. I want to welcome everyone to this studio tour with Enoc Perez and Christina Strassfield. I just wanted to tell you a few things. One is that this program will include a studio tour followed by a Q&A. The entire running time is somewhere around 50 to 60 minutes. If you go to the top right corner of your screen, you'll see a button that says speaker view or gallery view. We recommend the speaker view. I'm doing it right now for the tour because you'll be able to better see the detail of the works that are in Enoc Studio. And then you can switch back to the gallery view when we get to the Q&A section. So I'm Andrea Grover. I'm the Executive Director of Guildhall. I'm really thrilled to say that we considering all things. And we just opened a new exhibition, All for the Hall. It's a benefit exhibition, which was spearheaded by the artist Robert Longo. So please come by. There are over 60 artists on view. And also the John Drew Theater is now outside. It's the John Drew Backyard Theater. So we hope that you can come and participate in some of those programs. I wanted to point out our Director of Philanthropy, Kristen Eberstad, is here. Kristen, want to give a wave? Say hi.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here, and thank you for supporting Guildhall and artists.
And we're thrilled to have Kristen on board. And I wanted to thank all of you who represent our greatest members of Guildhall, so our chairmen, our directors, circles, and our sponsors. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm going to turn it over to our esteemed chairman, Mr. Marty Cohen.
Thank you, Andrea. And thank you all for joining us today. You know, we haven't let the situation that we're confronted with slow us down. As Andrea mentioned, we're carrying on with art, entertainment, theater, and programs such as this, where we can have virtual meetings and get-togethers and learning experiences. Guildhall is so honored to be the beneficiary of great supporters and support by some great artists such as Enoc Perez. So I'm going to let Christina take you through our virtual tour. And thank you, Christina, and thank you, Enoc, for letting us into your studio.
Thank you, Marty. We're extremely lucky to have this opportunity to visit with Enoc in his studio today. I always feel that when an artist is willing to let us into their studio, it's like them sharing their inner sanctum. As was mentioned, we were supposed to have Enoc's exhibition this past May, but because of the pandemic, it had to be postponed through April 24th through May 31st, 2021. Just a little background before we bring Enoc on. Enoc was born in San Juan, Puerto Rico in 1967. He's the son of a prominent art critic. He spent family vacations traveling to museums in different countries and learning about the history of art, and as a result was very well versed in art history and modern art as a youth. He had his first art lessons when he was 8 years old. In 1986, at 19 years old, he moved to New York to study painting at Pratt, before earning his master's degree at Hunter College. Finding himself at odds with his paintings and the teachers and students who were there, they thought his work was overly seductive and decorative. Perez maintained his belief that the importance of the aesthetics and pleasure is embracing art. Embracing art's potential for beauty, Perez began to paint sensuous nudes, still lifes, tropical resorts, modern architectural icons, and a sleek aesthetic work with dazzling, vibrant colors. He has had numerous solo museum exhibitions, and his work can be found in the collections of the Metropolitan Museum of Art, the Whitney Museum of American Art, the British Museum, the Museum of Contemporary Art, Yale University Art Gallery, the San Francisco Museum of Art, Pennsylvania Academy of the Arts, Corcoran Gallery, and many, many other museums, as well as numerous private collections. When I first met with Enoc and we began talking about the show, he was very excited about some work that he was currently working on. And the series had to do with Hurricane Maria and what happened in Puerto Rico in 2017, where the hurricane caused $90 billion worth of damage. And as we know, the island is still not fully recovered. So I'm going to turn it over to Enoc, who's going to be standing in front of these amazing works of art that I can't wait till the opportunity they come to Guildhall. So Enoc, can you talk a little bit about this body of work?
Yes, thank you for having me, and welcome to my studio here in Queens, New York. So, I have another studio in East Hampton too, and, I'm happy to show you these paintings I've been working on. I'll start with what's behind me. Since the origin of this work happened when I went to San Juan with my children, and this is after the Hurricane Maria, probably like a year and a half after, and I wanted to take the boys to like my favorite beach, and the beach was not there completely. So in this age of like constant like outrageous stories and news and things, you would think that wouldn't hit you as hard as it did, but it for some reason it resonated with me, stayed with me. So I started looking at pictures of how this happened, mostly in Twitter, because I like the sources of like real people like taking pictures, and started to look images of that beach and what was left and the process, and ended up with this image that was taken by some guy. I wish I know who it was, but some guy took this image with the horizon line sideways, uprooted palm trees, which probably sums up exactly how I felt at the time, to have this place that I love so much disappear, because probably some, icebergs are like melting and stuff. So, so I lost my beach. So went on this journey. So, I started actually, I think I started with this one. It's just like in painting, things go like in seasons. You can do the 4 seasons. I do mostly states of mind. And this is like an afternoon scene. It looks like a sunset. It also looks like, just reminds me of Apocalypse Now. I don't know if you remember that movie. Really great. And it has that air. And I'll show you more. Next painting, this is obviously the blue painting, which is pretty much, again, an emotional painting. Big. It has to be big because the magnitude of what's happening with, this climate events that we're looking at. I'll take you quickly to the third painting, which is this one, the invisible painting. I mean, the entire painting is drawn. It was painted just like the other ones, but with a different palette, and I finished it with a layer of white. You can see it, the texture is almost like sculpted on in a way. And I did this invisible painting because a lot of the histories of the Caribbean are invisible. They're not recorded, or they disappear. And I wanted to acknowledge that the invisibility of the peoples, of certain peoples. To me, it's a big deal, that little beach. And so, it doesn't have to be to everybody, but, so I made the invisible one. And lastly, probably the most realistic one, the black and white, which is, to me, it looks like the most realistic one out of all of them. Even though, they're all figurative paintings, and we all know what's in them. I like that, these images, just, to me, they're like self-portraits. They just look exactly how I felt after looking at the whole events after Hurricane Maria. And, you know, I remember with my parents, like without electricity for like a year, and, you know, everybody trying to hold on to their dignity, kind of like these palm trees are holding on to dear life here. The only thing in painting, they won't go anywhere. They will stay always with their dignity intact there. During the making of these paintings, and you know, I'm still like working some ideas for more paintings for this exhibition, because now since COVID, I have more time. You know, it's you know, I stumbled upon this sculpture. I made this 6 or 7 years ago, and you know, I said, well, let's polish it. It's a bronze, and it's a sculpture based. The subject of the sculpture is a hotel in San Juan that's been closed, actually. You know, not when I made the sculpture; it was still open. But for me, it's like a landmark hotel, or it was a landmark hotel in San Juan, and very much part of the personality of those in the island. And you know, it's made from I 3D scanned these swizzle sticks for drink stirrers. I have a large collection of them because I stopped drinking years ago, so I started collecting drink stirrers, and you know, collage, you know, make cast of it in plaster, and started like collaging the thing. It's really like a painter's sculpture, but you know, I like it. And then I put it on this base, which is just thrown together, but to me it looks like a raft, and it reminds me very much of the migration from people from Cuba to Florida. They took rafts to get out of Cuba. I remember that vividly. And this looks like a raft. And then I have this motif that reminds me of the people of Puerto Rico in what looks like, from some angles, it looks like a sail. So for me, it's a raft. And I thought, you know what? These migrations that are happening with climate change are very much real, are happening. And this seems to like illustrate that again, in my view, in my mind. So I think that this sculpture will be part of the exhibition along with the palm trees. And you know, when I take you along the studio, I'll show you some of the other paintings that I may be including in the exhibition.
Before we move on, Enoc, can you talk a little bit about the repetition of the same image, just like what Andy Warhol did, and how Andy Warhol influenced you?
Yeah, you know what, it's the whole process, and I will demonstrate later how I make the paintings, is a process of printmaking that I invented, you know, like in the early 90s. And, you know, it was my way to connecting, like associating myself with the painters of New York, actually. Then the repetition is one of like Warhol's contribution. You know, you can use it to different effects. I wanted to do different kinds of day or different moods with the same image. And I think the repetition on a large scale image of this dramatic image would work very well to bring the subject to light, to bring, you know, these are paintings that I need to make, you know, and so I thought that it would be stronger to have this same image again and again in grand scale, and you know, just so it stays in your mind.
Absolutely. What's also very interesting about the paintings is that all of the palm trees are decimated, but they're still standing. So there's a feeling of hope in the paintings, and there's a feeling of survival. Was that your intention when you were creating these?
Yeah, the latter, survival. Yeah, hope. I hold on to it, and I think it's incredibly important, because otherwise, you know, you perish. So yeah, you have to be hopeful, but survival, absolutely. You know, this is dignity, and dignity. Remember that the palm tree is lost at sea, but the painting is not going to change. So that dignity is holding on forever. And that's, I can guarantee you that, you know, the dignity, I mean, being from San Juan myself, we always have it. As an American, I have that same dignity too. So you're like right on with that, with the way of seeing it. It's very much about survival and dignity, even in the worst of moments. So, you know, even though they don't look sad, but, you know, they are, you know, it reminds me a little bit of like French painting during the Revolution. Like you take some of these raft paintings, this gigantic Delacroix, and there's a few paintings. God, I forget the masters, but there are paintings that are made during trying times. Tend to have that that air just of survival, of, you know, wing beneath, you know, of, I don't know, this wonderful, like heavenly force that
Uplifting.
will lift you.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Enoc, you had really gained a lot of attention when you did a series of paintings that had to do with landmark buildings, the United Nations, the TWA building, the Philip Glass Johnson's building. And those were about utopian ambitions and optimism. So again, there's a similarity to each body of work that you're doing, even though the subject matter is so different. Do you have any of those that you could show us?
I have one here, actually. This is a commission for this hotel in Miami Beach. And again, it's a modernist building, actually a Lapidus building. You know, it has that sense of hope and that sense of optimism that actually a lot of the early hotels that I painted from San Juan that are now closed or abandoned had too at the time, which is interesting because they're, you know, it's like they're like ships that like sink at sea, and then we find this, like it's like finding the Titanic. And but you know, the thing about it is that on the face of it is it's very optimistic. You know, they look triumphant and beautiful, and I love that because, you know, I'm in it for the wonder of it, the beauty. But you know, the whole thing too, the realistic part is that you know, the histories of these things, no, they don't get in the way. They just explain themselves. So it's funny. I don't know if I ever believed in utopia. I just I like the idea of it, but you know, I just don't think it's gonna happen. But you know, we hope for it. I think it's okay to dream.
To dream.
So you know, and this definitely I'm a dreamer, or you know, as an you know, I'd like to dream. Yeah.
When you first did a lot of those buildings, you also did sculpture. Was that the first time you had done sculpture?
The first sculptures I made were actually like for probably like 10 years after doing like my first architecture, because I tried for years. Actually, that's interesting because when I first got a house in East Hampton, this is like 10 years ago. I finally had a studio that like nobody knew I was there and nobody came by. So I started experimenting. I started making all these like, you know, my own versions of like Greek sculptures, that terrible stuff. But it was okay because nobody sees it. And then, you know, I realized that I had, if I made a sculpture that had to do more directly with the paintings that I made, maybe I would be more successful. That's where the collection of drink stirrers came into play. And then we had 3D scanning at the time, so I could actually enlarge them and collage them and crush them together and make a composition out of it. And you know, these are, as I say, these are painter sculptures. You know, these are no Richard Serras. These are like, painter sculptures, a different genre almost. And, I enjoy making them. And for me, I see them as collages, just an extension of drawing almost.
And your process in general, your painting, your sculpture, and then your painting, which is almost like printmaking. So you have all of these elements that you're going back and forth with constantly.
Yeah, actually, I'll show you some, maybe I'll show you how I make the paintings. You see, I have these paintings from 2012 that I got back recently, and I'm so happy to have them because I made 8 of them. And, I got these, and they have the printmaking process becomes almost very clear here, but I'm going to demonstrate to you how I make them. So
Right.
Then this will look cooler once I hope that's okay.
Absolutely.
This is a room where I paint. When I first, I got used to working in my garage in East Hampton, so it's smaller. So when I moved the studio to Queens, I built myself a smaller room because I couldn't paint in the big one because everybody would come through and like talk to me and I couldn't do it. So I built this little room, and what you see here are just a quick explanation of all these figures. They're paintings based on the photographs of Carlo Molino, Italian architect, interior designer, race car driver, ski instructor, who took these photographs. He was a photographer too. He wrote a book about it. And these are paintings, these are Polaroids, paintings of Polaroids that they found after his death. He never showed them to anybody. And when he died, they find like 2,000 of these. So I started like making them partly because I think they speak of something that's beyond the figure. They're almost metaphysical. They're kind of like ghosts in a way, but not really. They're also beautiful. And I've been making these. My hope is to have like 50 of these and make a show of them. I think so far I have only like 12 or 16. But, so I keep them around me because they just make me feel good. So I'll show you. This is one of those hotels from Puerto Rico, like when it was in its glory. Right now, this is another abandoned place. So I may put this painting for the Guildhall, maybe for the back room, and depends on how it comes out. But I'll show you how the paintings are made. The paintings are made. Look, being a young guy in New York, I wanted for my painting to have a relationship with the masters of the city. For me, Andy Warhol, Rauschenberg, people like Christopher Wool are interesting. Philip Taft, there's a whole genealogy, actually, out there in the neighborhood. You have David Saleh, you have Richard Prince, you have Eric Fisher, you have the best artists there. And I love being in that same neighborhood. And I love about New York the fact that I have gotten to meet and be friends with all of them. And it's, that's the beauty of New York City, So, besides the stories, it's hard to put these clothes. They should make them easier to. So, on a piece of paper, I applied oil paint on the back. The image of the photograph that I want to paint is projected onto the paper, and I will draw it onto the canvas. I'll show you how. I take color, for example, this dark turquoise, almost a green. With my hand, I smooth it out, or I can leave it really thick. I can do whatever I want with it. Then I take a school pencil and I go to the image and I start drawing, whatever corresponds to the image. I'm drawing here some palm leaves. And what I get is like a print, like carbon paper. It's like a primitive way of printmaking. And that's how the paintings get made. Interesting thing about the process is that, and not intended, is that I end up constructing a painting without the use of brushes. And wasn't interesting to me until a collector friend of mine pointed out that Pollock didn't use brushes, so that was so exciting. You know, I'm not presuming of any of that. I'm just saying that it's a cool side effect. So, so for every color that goes on the painting, that's how it goes, you know. And then for little details, I take little pieces of paper and I go with a little pencil and I add up whatever needs to be added up. So in order not to cheat, which is like an old-fashioned concept, but I believe you have to be who you say you are. So
How did you first decide you wanted to paint like this as opposed to painting with a brush?
you know, the brush thing wasn't, I just knew that my strength was as a draftsman, you know, so I knew that was strong. I had a studio on 49th Street, like what they call Hell's Kitchen, and I got mugged. I remember, and I'm like, I cannot spend that much time in the studio, but I used to collage the drawings onto the paintings. I'm like, how can I get this drawing? So I started to make the drawings at home, and then I started to add oil stick on the back of those drawings and redo the drawings on the canvas, and then could leave the studio quickly. And as I realized, you know, I did that for a little bit, and then I realized when I see a color Xerox machine, my sister was working at Ralph Lauren at the time, and they had this Xerox machine, and I saw that with 4 colors, I opened it, 4 colors, it made these beautiful pictures. So I thought if I applied that to my method, I may have something. And so I started doing it like that with 4 colors. Obviously now it takes a lot more than 4 colors, but that's how I ended with that. I just, you know, and that's what makes me hard to like qualify, or like if you want to classify, like put my work into a classification is hard, because all my generation painters, you know, they start putting me in shows together, in group shows with Elizabeth Payton, like Luke Tuymans, people like that, that are, I love their work, but they're brush painters. So I was never, you know, like a member of that club. And, you know, it's been later that I start to meet like all these other artists, you know, like Richard Prince, like David Saller, like Eric, that are much more in sync with how I make the paintings. I think the attitude is a little bit more progressive than to just go and paint like an old master, at least from my point of view. I'm not saying that's the only way, I'm just saying that's my way.
That's your way. No, that's absolutely true. And it's unique to what you're doing. So that's quite exciting. But you did fall into the same areas in terms of you definitely did nudes, just like Eric Fischel did, as Elizabeth Payton did. You've also done a number of still lifes. Can we see some of those materials as well?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, this is what I've been doing this summer. You see Chateau Marmont there. This is interior of Peter and Stephanie Brandt in Connecticut. This is some cool building in France that I just have to make. I'll show you. I've been making small paintings in the quarantine. Yves Saint Laurent and Pierre Berger's Paris apartment. You can see the process very obvious in these paintings, and you know that's another way to do this. When you look at the portrait of Madonna, it's a lot more dense, and you know, but it's again the technique is there. It's all done in the same way. And I take you to the architectures here. See, this is again, these are the Marina Towers in Chicago. I did this in 2011 to 2012. And I made 8 of these paintings. We showed them at the Corcoran Art Gallery in DC. And same technique. At this point, I was looking at Cy Twombly's Bacchus Cycle, those beautiful red paintings. And I wanted to make red paintings. And I wanted them to look more abstract, so I started layering, doing the drawings, but with a lot more color behind that paper. So you start to create a texture. It almost looks like decay, actually. And you know, it's actually, it made sense to me. Look, it has these little bubbles here, like little Yves Kleins. And it made sense to me because, look, you know, I change every day. When I look in the mirror, you know, there's less hair, there's something wrong every day. And this, you know, this is what happens with life. So, and it was an extension of the repurposing of the same method. So, you know, if you follow Gerard Richter's dictum, you know, he can do a fantastic abstract painting and a fantastic figurative painting and put them in the same show. I think it's wonderful. So, I'll take you more upstairs. There's a little palm tree for like a show, but I don't know if I'm gonna put it in, but I think it's nice. This is a picture of a Bernini. I just always love this sculpture. And again, you know, the Italian thing, like the Molina figures, there's the beauty of it, the sense of awe, you know, like when you're a child. I saw that sculpture probably at age 12 for the first time. And to this day, I still like, my jaw just drops when I see this sculpture because how was it made? And so I'm trying to convey that sense of awe, like that sense of that beautiful moment when you see something that you want to emanate or you want to aspire to. And, you know, so of course I'm gonna make a painting. Wasn't an easy one to make. Let's go. Show you a little bit here. And there's a little bit of what I've been doing this summer and a little bit of what I do normally. This is a portrait of Yves Saint Laurent Mills.
Loulou de la Falaise.
Loulou de la Falaise. I just thought it was a beautiful picture, actually. And, you know, I make the portraits. I make portraits of people that I like, or, you know, people that in some way or another, I think there's more than the actual picture to them. This car on fire, I made literally 2 weeks ago. And lately I've been making a lot of fires, you know, but, you know, it makes sense. I mean, I watch TV. There's so much stuff on fire. You know.
I think you were talking about natural disasters versus, you know, man-made disasters, and I think that's so true. That we see climate change and all of that natural, and that there's so much car crashes, fires, all sorts of things that man has created, explosions, and sort of that dichotomy of both of those in the same time frame.
Yeah, and it's happening, and it's also a part of like the art canon. If you take like Andy Warhol's like disasters, you know, those car crashes with bullets coming out of it. My thing, it's just, you know, the whole idea of fire. I mean, look, you have the forest fires like in Australia. You have the fires that you're seeing in every protest around the globe. There are times that are times of fire. So I think we're in a time that is such. So that, you know, you're a witness. Part of being an artist is being a witness. So I witness, I paint. Also, for example, there's this painting of this Modigliani here. I made the painting because I always loved that Modigliani and I wanted to have it. So I painted it with the frame and everything. And it's just nice, you know, because painting can be all of those things at the same time. Doesn't have to be one thing. It can be many, many things. So for me, painting is something I live with. It's you know, what I am, what I think, and what my hopes are, and, you know, they're a reflection of reality as well. So many, you know, it can hold everything in it.
And obviously you do have an aesthetic, you're reaching for beauty as well. And something,
you know, when it happens, it's good. I mean, look, some paintings are not so pretty, you know, it's okay. But if they can be beautiful, for me, look, I make paintings that I want to hang in my own house. Paintings I want to live with. And that's always been a rule. And, you know, and stuff that is cool. I want to make cool things that I like. So, you know, if I like the Modigliani, I'm going to paint it. You know, if I like the Bernini, we're painting it. I see a situation, losing a beach in San Juan, that bothered me, so I'm gonna address it. There's so much that you can address with painting, and I just try to address everything that matters in my life. Hopefully, that will resonate with somebody else. Let's go downstairs.
So your studio is in Queens. Enoc, how long have you been in this location?
Only like 2 years. I was in Midtown Manhattan before that in Dumbo, but it got really fancy, so I just left because the rents went up. So then I was in Midtown for a long time, and then I turned 50, and I wanted a bigger studio, so I got it. Now, I'm like, midlife crisis is kind of over. So it's, so 2 years ago, I started working with two young gentlemen, and I asked them to make it possible for me to close the studio for a year to figure out what I wanted to do, because 50 is a tricky age, You're still kind of young, but you're also old, and both things are true at the same time. So how do you write the second chapter? So I started, making different paintings, and I realized that the best part of my, some of the best work I made when I was in my 30s. So how do you recover that guy? How do you get that guy back and get into that state of mind? And, and what subjects do you want to tackle? So I started to make paintings of interiors, which are in a way like the buildings, because the buildings to me are portraits. And, I started painting interiors, and it just became a thing. I knew a lot of beautiful interiors, and they're portraits of people I admire. I do portraits directly as well. And what I've been, for the past 2 years, I've been on a search and on a road to paint like the 25-year-old I was once. And, I'm getting closer. I'm getting close and close. It's not easy, actually. It sounds easy, but it's not.
Well, you have the passion to create, and you've created masterpieces in so many different styles, working in all different medias, and we're really thrilled. I wanted to let everyone know that Enoc is in our All for the Hall exhibition, which opened last week. And there's currently a wonderful work, a still life. Patrick, can you bring the still life up for a moment of the piece that Enoc has done? It's a great piece. It's a still life done in watercolor of Bacardi. He's done a number of these kind of still lifes with drinks and bottles, which is reminiscent of so many previous artists who have documented this work. So they're really quite wonderful. So I encourage you all to go to our All for the Hall exhibition to look for Enoc's work and to look at all the other works that are there. I also just want to say that this has been a really wonderful opportunity for us to have this virtual studio visit with Enoc, and we hope that when it permits, that we will all be invited to come to the real studio in Queens to see some other work, perhaps either before or during our exhibition run, which we really would like to do. I think
hope so.
there are a few questions that are available to us from the audience.
Yeah, can I tell you one thing before about the watercolor?
Absolutely. Yes, please do.
That watercolor, I made that I think in 2009, and I stopped making them in 2012 because I stopped drinking. So, I'm never gonna make those again because they were like self-portraits, like the palm trees, Bacardi, Puerto Rican rum, me. And, so when I stopped drinking, the bottles went away. Anyway, that was it. We can start with the questions.
That's good. Let's see what we have here. One of the persons has asked, am I reading the questions? Yes. Okay. What is the artist's style of painting called? So you don't really consider yourself one painter, do you? One painting style?
No, I'm just like a New York painter. That's what I would like to be acknowledged. Like, I want to be like one of like, you know, like the painters, a New York painter. Probably I would be a figurative painter by definition, but spiritually I'm kind of like somewhere in between. But a New York painter would be what I like to be qualified. They always say Puerto Rican painter, which I'm happy to be too. As long as I'm a painter, I'm very good.
That's good. Another question is, does he mostly paint from photographs?
Yes, mostly very well-researched photographed. I have a good library. I have powerful computers and a very willing group of associates to help me look and find the best possible images. That's like half of the work, because you know you don't want to waste your time making something stupid. So all the best images, the best stuff, and the most significant that I can get.
Do you manipulate your images on the computer before you then decide to put them on the canvas?
Not really. No, you know, if anything happens is when I paint the image, I try to be as loyal to the original as possible, but it always comes out loopy, and that's because of my head. And, you know, that's kind of where the art is, you know, because you can't lie in this thing. So, you know, I'm like, oh my God, this is just like the picture. And then you look at it, it's a whole different thing. But, you know, I fool myself in that way, and it's part of how I work.
This is a good question. I had the same question. How did growing up with an art critic father influence your viewpoints and experiences?
You know what? My father is a critic. He's much older now, but he was a critic in San Juan. He had his group of friends, and I tell you a few things. Acute awareness of art. I saw the respect that my father had for his artist friends. So I have a great respect for other artists, and that's always, I consider that a privilege. All these gentlemen and artists that I was talking, David, Eric Fitchell, all this, it's a privilege to be friends with such great talent and great artists. And another thing about being with my father, you know, there were also a lot of, like, I looked at a lot of bad art too. And, you know, I think it gave me an eye for when I see something that's good, I know it, because I saw a lot of bad stuff. So, you know, it's, and also, you know, the respect, like, for example, like the trips we would make, like, I think in 1974, 73, we traveled to New York to go see Guernica because it was at the Modern. That's before Tony Shafrasi spray painted. So that's, you know, that kind of thing I remember, and it's in my mind. And I guess some people raise their kids to be tennis players. I was, you know, kind of like in the art direction.
Did you ever consider being something else other than an artist?
Yeah, I wanted to be a psychiatrist. Yeah, that you know, I thought it would be nice. You know, I wanted to be a genetic engineer at one point, and then at the end of the day, I, you know, just decided to be an artist. And then my father said, if you're gonna study art, you gotta go to New York. I wanted to stay in San Juan, but he was right. Absolutely, you know, New York, and I wanted to be close to Jean-Michel Basquiat. I wanted to be in the same city as Warhol. I wanted to be in the same city as Julian Schnabel. You know, all those pictures of him coming out of a pool, all wet, fat, you know, with the brush. I wanted to be that guy, you know, well-fed. You understand? Like, beautiful. I just wanted to be him. I wanted to be all of them.
Enoc, the painting that is erased, is that also an homage to Rauschenberg's erasing the de Kooning painting?
You know what? I haven't reasoned that like that, but you probably, you know, at least in my life, I make a picture, and when someone like you comes in, for everybody that may be watching, before the interview, Christina had a number of questions, and I was so surprised because she hadn't seen the contents of the studio, and they were like right on target. It could be an homage to the Erase the Kooning drawing.
But this was Andrea made that point. I didn't make that one point.
But you know what? You know, this is coming probably from like an area of frustration about the invisibility of the histories of people from certain parts of the world, and you know, there's no factor of prank or complicity. Like, you know, Rauschenberg got the Kooning to agree to give him a drawing, and he raised it, just a breakthrough, radical piece. You know, this is probably taking that result to a different end. You know, when these actions then become part of the language and the rules of painting, so they become things that we can use.
Yes.
You know, and you can see that, you know, like, look, even in the Hamptons there, again, talking about David and Eric and Richard Prince, these people were making paintings where it wasn't popular. Then I come in the 80s, I can make paintings because they were breaking ground before me. And that's, you know, that's how I feel very much obliged to New York, because there's a lot of, I think it's a wonderful art town.
And you're a part of it. You're a major part of it right now. We have a wonderful question. You have a picture of a purple car crash, and it is an extremely exciting piece. So can you talk about that for a minute?
Of course, yeah. You know what? I made this in 2019. First thing was that I saw the picture and I saw, like, my God, this is somebody's masculinity in the ditch there. You know, a shiny object that you can't use for anything. Yeah, it reminded me of myself. I wanted to be a 007 James Bond's most ridiculous idea of being a man. And then I was thinking, like, let's title it 2019, because 2019 is horrible. Now in 2020, you know, I think I should retitle it 2020, because this year is just really like taking the price. So, I mean, and you know, it's the idea of this. I think as a society, as a people, we're like that shiny, beautiful object. And right now, it's like we can't do anything. You know, it is also, though, like how fragile, at least masculinity is in my eyes. So, you know, at least my own. I can only speak for myself, actually.
Well, life in general, we have to think of it.
Yeah. No, it's funny because, like, you know, I just saw this documentary on Frank Sinatra the other day. And my God, that was like, it's like a different species of man compared to someone like me. You know, I'm like a little boy, you know. And so, you know, I guess I'm talking about, that's the aspiration. And, you know, it's not going anywhere. It's also like in my, like, you know, my midlife crisis, I got a nice car and it didn't do anything. The problem was in the studio. And when I solved the problem in the studio, I'm all more relaxed now.
Wonderful. Another question about the modernist buildings. Can you, Marty actually would like you to talk a little bit more about the choices, I guess, in the buildings that you decided to paint.
Sure. I'll talk in front of one of the paintings of one. The paintings started. The first architecture I made was actually precisely of this building that's in this sculpture. It's upside down here, but you get a gist. It's called a Normandy. First architecture, as most of my art, it comes from my experience. And I made that painting because at the time I met my wife, and my wife was married to another dude. And so I wanted to make a show about her in code. So I knew the story of a hotel called the Normandy in San Juan. It was a hotel made by a Puerto Rican architect as a love letter, let's say, to his French wife. My wife is French. I thought, oh, this is a wonderful, like, you know, portrait of her, like in disguise. And the painting hung in the studio for like 2 weeks, little painting like this. And, then I'm like, oh, amazing. Wait a minute. It becomes like some iconic, like signifier when it's painted. And then I started looking at the architecture of the hotels in Puerto Rico, and it's all like international modern style, beautiful buildings, probably the biggest structures in the island. And I felt a sense that they belong to me. And at the time I focused on speaking about the aspect of the architecture per se, because the architecture is fantastic and I'm an architecture groupie. However, they also speak about colonialism. So, I thought, what an interesting subject. Of course, then, I started looking at the architecture of New York City, the architecture of Latin America, the Middle East. Architecture is a gold mine. It's beautiful. So, and, they're abstract, they're portraits of these abstract things, and they mean something to people. You have no idea how many children of the architects I have met that come and see a painting of a building that their father designed. And, how many of these buildings have been demolished. And this is a very special thing, and it speaks to our humanity. And I think it's nice for a change to address high culture as a subject rather than low culture, which seems so prevalent.
So how interesting, because certain, of course, buildings that the moment I saw your building of the United Nations, I guess what it stands for as well, but the monumentality of that particular piece sort of blew me away, took my breath away, actually. And so I totally understand what you're saying when you've created these buildings. Do you ever look back on ancient architecture?
I do. I actually, it's a tricky thing. Some ancient architecture, sure, it's been used like, like, for example, how Roman architecture or Greek architecture was used by fascist governments as a style, as an official style. I actually like the scale, but it has so much history that it feels more than I can like grapple. So I stick to what I know better, and I'm not a scholar. I'm just like a guy, always. I'm a guy that likes stuff, and I will paint it because I love it, and I want to make a cool painting. It's oversimplifying it, but it's in a gist.
Right. Well, it's really wonderful. And you're going to be having a show coming up very quickly. So do you want to mention that to
Oh,
all?
yeah. My friend Harper Levine and I were talking 2 weeks ago, and he has a space on the back of his bookstore in East Hampton. And he said, Enoc, you have a studio full of paintings from like the quarantine. I've been making these little paintings all by myself, in East Hampton. And I'm like, that's a cool idea. So we're gonna have we're gonna do a little show in the back of Harper's bookstore. So please come. I think he's gonna open it on August 22nd, and I think I'm gonna call it The Fires. So
That's really great. Well, this has been so wonderful. I want everyone to go see that show. I want everyone to come to All for the Hall to see Enoc's piece with us and to see the rest of our exhibition. This has been extremely wonderful, and we really look forward to having more conversations like this during your show and actually getting to visit the studio and seeing what great new works you're going to be doing. So I'm going to turn it over to Andrea.
Great, thank you. Well, I want to thank everyone for joining us, and we will have other artist studio visits coming up in the near future. And I want to thank Enoc. I so enjoyed this conversation today. And yes, big round of applause here.
thank you, appreciate it.
Please come and see his painting, the Bacardi, in person at Guildhall. We'll see.
Oh, they found it? It's a nice watercolor. I don't, I like it.
It's
Yeah, the story is really meaningful too. So, okay, thank you, everyone. Have a great evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Bye.
Bye-bye.